Guess you want me to make an opening statement? Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Start practice on Tuesday. And the guys have been doing a good job in the weight room. Our strength staff really pleased with the work they've done. A lot of new guys. I'm still learning all their names. There's a lot of wide open competitions, I think, at every position. I don't think there's a single returning full-time starter on defense and maybe only 2 on offense. So it's probably might be the least in the country. I'm not sure. I didn't study anybody else, but it's pretty unique. I don't know if I've ever remember not having any on defense and only 1 or 2 on offense. But that's why we have spring practice, why we recruit, and I've enjoyed working with the guys the things we've done so far, and really look forward to practice on Tuesday. With that, we'll open it up.
So, Rich, start with just spring. What are the keys for you to get out of this spring?
Yeah, in particular because it's our first spring together. There's always a little bit more evaluation. Typically, the second and third year, there's less evaluation because you know your roster. Now we've got to do. Part of spring is obviously evaluation and seeing what we got, and then the other part is teaching and the schemes and the fundamentals and all those things. So the first spring is always the most important from that aspect. And then there's another portal period. You used to know what your roster was going to be right now, but it's because there's another portal period. The roster may be looking a little different in May. So it's a little different challenge and a little different dynamics than previous years, but it's also kind of fun and exciting. I'm looking forward to watching our guys compete and evaluate and see what we got. I have some concerns on certain positions, but what coach doesn't? And hopefully by the end of spring, some of those will be alleviated.
The portal, that second part, concern. Coaches talk about not playing the spring game because people can evaluate your roster. And are you concerned about getting things out there so guys can evaluate backups?
Yeah, good point. I think before you used to worry about, let's not show too much in the spring. You're worried about schemes, like certain plays, whatever. And now, hell, let's not show, they don't want to see your guys see your players because there is tampering. It's rampant. You don't see tampering in the NFL because you'll lose draft picks. You'll get fined. But in college, there's you don't see anybody getting in trouble for tampering. And so it's, I know some other coaches. I think Matt over in Nebraska is not having a spring game because he don't want people to evaluate his players.
Did I see that right?
I don't know. It may be. You guys would know better than I do. But I could see their point. It's like, geez, why? I got this guy that's really good, and he goes out there and shows out. Somebody's going to offer him $500,000 and take him from your program, and if they don't direct tamper it, they'll do it through a high school coach or do it through somebody in the community or through an agent or something. And so, yeah, I think there's no question. We have thought about that from an open standpoint. I want our fans to watch our players, but a true spring game where you're going to really see a guy, show out and all that, you're probably not going to have that. We'll have some, a little bit of scrimmage and play a little football, but I am worried about it because, there's not as much structure to keep the tampering away as there should be.
Coach, was that part of any conversation? Some coaches have decided when they were going to do the spring schedule, when they would have the spring game, when they would open up practice, because of the portal.
I think a little bit. Now mine was I wanted to have a week of meetings with our players, both with me and the other coaches, before the portal opens. And so we had originally was going to be, I think, April 12th, and I moved it back to the 5th because I wanted to have a whole week of meetings. And not just because of that, but I think there's going to be, looks like a reduction in roster size. Like, going to be, if they cut it down to 105, there's going to be a lot of guys that get cut that you're going to have to cut. And that's going to be really hard because a guy that does everything right and he maybe just not quite good enough to be on your 105, but you want him on your roster, you got to cut him now. And so that part, I wish that wasn't the number. I'm still hoping that maybe we can grandfather that in and eventually get to that number because I'd hate there's going to be some really good players and some really hard-working young men that we have to cut just to fit the roster size, and that's not going to be fun at all.
Rich, in terms of your schemes, with so many new people trying to piece together guys from all sorts of different schemes, you have to go slower right now trying to install everything?
Typically, the coach big answer would be yes, but because of how we do things, that's probably no. We just try to make sure we try to accelerate our guys' learning process. We're not going to have like longer practices to get it done. We're able to do more with our guys in the summer, so there's not the urgency to make sure they're all learned it by the spring is not the same as it used to be, because back in the day, you couldn't say anything in the summer. You couldn't even ask the strength coach how they were working out. But now you can work with them a little bit, particularly in the month of June. And so that urgency as far as scheme-wise is not there as much as what it used to be. I have more of a sense of urgency to evaluate than I do to teach. The scheme is always going to be part of it. And coaches, especially assistant coaches, they love getting into the scheme part of it. But I think the evaluation piece for us is more important right now than the what we're doing scheme wise.
Rich, we took over here a lot of years ago, and now second time. Compare the two. What both talent and I mean, you were a new coach then.
I actually have thought about that a little bit. When some of the former players come back, and then my old teammate Steve Newberry came here today. You guys know Steve is great. He's just things have changed so much. But back then, I was that was my first job, not as a head coach, but first job as a big school head coach, and so I was still learning a lot and learning on the job. Love it. Like I said, I'd hope I'm a better coach today than I was a year ago. I'm a better coach, I know for sure, than I was 17 years ago or 25 years ago when that happened. And there's different challenges too, right? Back then, you kind of knew what your roster was, and the periods. Now there's so much roster turnover and different things that you got to deal with as a coach that you didn't have to deal with back then. So you have to evolve, and if you want to win or have success as a coach at this level or any level, you better, if the goalposts are moving, you better move with it. And that's what I've tried to learn and keep doing. But I'm still every day I try to, I'm kind of a football junkie, and whether it's schemes or recruiting or methods or whatever, I try to learn something every day. And it's easier now to learn because of, it's easier to get stuff out there, whether it's on social media. And, I'm not a big social media. I let Raquel handle social media for me. But there's stuff on Twitter every day. There's like schemes and plays, and I'm like, I'll look at it like, man, that seems pretty neat. Or you'll hear a coach give a lecture and like, geez, that's a pretty good point. It's like what Matt Rule was talking about in Nebraska. I never thought about, hey, guys watching your players on your spring game. That might be a scary, well, okay, maybe I should think about it. So there is, I guess to answer your question, there is a lot more knowledge and a lot more things that I know now that I didn't know in 2001, but there's also more challenges too to being a head coach.
Are players different?
I say, I've said this a bunch. I said, 25 years ago, you tell a player, okay, run through that wall, and he'll run through that wall and not say anything. Now they'll still run through that wall, but they want to know why. And if you don't give them the right answer, they'll Google it on their phone and say, well, that ain't what it says here on Google. So they're a lot smarter. Now, are they as mentally, physically tougher? I don't know about that. Are they overall more entitled or feel more entitled? Yeah, I think that's yes, but not all of them. And I also think that you can maybe coach some of that out of them. The sense of entitlement is the worst thing you're dealing with now, I think, in youth in general, not just football players or athletes. I think of the youth in general. But I still think they can get coached, and we're still coaching them. I don't mind telling you, we're going to coach. It's not being old school. It's not like that. I think good players want to be coached. Great players want to be coached. The average ones don't want to be coached. That's kind of my opinion on it.
Here's your evaluations. In your evaluations, whether it's toughness or on-field play or whatever, how much can you get out of one-on-one drills, shells, things like that, versus Are there some things you've got to see in 11 on 11?
Yeah, I do think there are, as much as you'd hoped you could get everything out of without going 11 on 11 and scrimmaging, whatever. I think you have to have those moments when you're playing football. And it's the same way with a quarterback. I usually typically, if you use your first or second quarterback, you don't have them live, maybe in spring or even the fall camp. But sometimes you got to have them live just to see. They may be different. They run a little faster. Well, that's like the kid I had at Jack State last year, Tyler Huff. I didn't have him in the spring. And in camp, he wasn't live. And he was a good runner, but we wouldn't know for sure. And then it was until we played Louisville, second game of the year, and he was live, and he was all of a sudden making a guy miss and running over DBs. And I'm like, holy cow, this guy's a whole lot better runner than we thought. The same way, like, that's how smart I was with Pat White back in 2000 and whatever that was. We're playing Louisville, and Adam Bednair gets hurt, and Pat goes in there and leads us to a comeback and win. And he wasn't live in practice, but boy, he was sure a hell lot faster in that game than I remember in practice. And that was our fault for not having more live opportunities. So we're going to try to get our guys in that, live situation without doing so much of it that you're beating them up or taking too much of an undue risk.
Coach, you mentioned the positions being open and even talking a lot about the quarterback position. What do you want to see out of who's going to be your starter? What's going to go into that for you? Is there any advantage?
Yeah,
Nico was here last year.
Yeah, I think, I watched a little bit of film. Obviously I thought Garrett was a really good player and very dynamic, but he was senior. And I thought Nico in his opportunities he played really, really well. I think it was the Arizona game and maybe it was Cincinnati. But I thought he played really well, had a great command about him. So I think we're really pleased that he's coming back, and we think we've got good competition at room. I think of all the rooms, we don't have, Nico's got some experience, and some of the other quarterbacks do too at other schools. But that's probably one position I feel more comfortable with, that the talent that we have, and even with the those guys' ability to learn and run our system and all that. I think we're in good shape at the quarterback position with the guys that we got. Now Rhett and I are going to figure it all out and give a lot of guys opportunities. But there's some really really good skill in that room, and we got some experience with Nico and some of those other guys. So I feel pretty good about the quarterback room right now.
Is taking care of the football?
All that's part of it. It's in our system is I don't know if quarterback friendly is the right word. It's quarterback centric, I guess you would say, because we do, we're going to play with 11. Not all the guys or quarterbacks are going to be 4-4, 4-5 runners, but it's like Tyler Huff last year. He was a 4-7 guy, but he was a very competitive runner. I think all of our quarterbacks have competitive athleticism and kind of that same kind of mental toughness that they'll run when we need them to run. So we'll play with 11, and whatever they feature, whatever they do the best, whatever they're the best at, that's probably what we'll feature on our offense. But in the spring, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch those guys compete.
With a coaching change, there's always kind of the installation of a new culture. Whether or not you think the old one was good or not, you're always bringing something different to the program and you take over. Can you talk about what you've been doing in winter workouts and what you plan on doing in spring ball to really best instill your culture and your brand of football? Yeah,
every coach does. You're right. Every coach talks about culture and how important it is, but do they actually live it? Is it a standard that's held every day? And I don't, whatever was here a year ago or 3 months ago, was not nearly important as what is going on right now. I rehired Mike Joseph as a strength coach. I think he's fantastic. I was able to bring Parker Whiteman with me, who's been in our system. And those guys, I've been really pleased with the workouts. It looks like we're doing their testing now, so I don't know what their strength numbers are, but I think they're in better shape now than they were a month and a half ago, and they've worked really hard. So I feel good about that. Again, we haven't practiced yet, so I'll be able to give you more information on how they go about practice. There's been moments when we've done what we call skill development where I'm thinking their version of playing hard and my version of playing hard maybe is not quite matched up yet. But I think I think they're willing. I think our guys really are eager and are buying into what we're asking them to do. They don't have a choice, but I do think they've got a good attitude and they're eager to prove themselves and work hard.
What you've seen so far on that end, you talked about players kind of starting to buy in, culture-wise or just workout-wise? Anyone that's really shining so far?
Yeah, it's I understand. I'm hesitant to single anybody out. There's not really, like I said, there's not like a returning 2 or 3 year starter guys that say, hey, this guy's a team leader because he's been doing it for hell. There ain't any. I mean, they ain't none of these. Now, some of these guys have played at other schools, but I ain't really got. I mean, Jaheim, he got a little banged up knee. He's played a little bit on offense, and Rodney Gallagher's played a little bit on offense. But hell, who else on here is like, hey, this dude's been 2-3 year starter, and he's the guy you'll pencil in as one of your leaders right now. There ain't none of them. So, but that's okay. I mean, there's enough talent there, enough guys to work with, and I think we've done some workouts with them. But the first couple practices will be a little bit of shock to the system, and not so much that just being Mr. Hard Guy or nothing like that. It's just it's different schemes, it's different drills, it's different tempos and stuff like that they're going to get accustomed to. And usually the first couple practices are harder. And our guys, I've told our guys, we did these early morning workouts, but these workouts called Tour Duty, where they do different stations. And I used to do like 10, 12 of these. Now I only did 4. But I saw a big difference from the first day we did it, from an effort and an understanding standpoint, until the last one we did this morning. And I thought they did a really good job of adapting to that. So I feel encouraged, I guess, to answer your question, that these guys will adapt to practice pretty well.
Have you ever more comfortable in the quarterback room? What are some of the positions, you mentioned concerns obviously at the start, what are some of the positions you need to see more from, or kind of get an idea?
Well, there's 11 new starters on defense, and there's 9 or 10 on offense. So there's 11 concerns on defense, and there's 9 or 10 on. I mean, I'm not being coach speak. I mean, hell, that's the truth. Of like that. We were watching. I don't want to watch too much of last year because last year was last year and different guys, whatever. But you're watching some cut ups of Pitt, and then did that as a staff. Then I watched a little bit of Texas Tech till I threw up. So I watched a little bit of that and got sick. But it wasn't as much, I guess, useful to me because most of the guys playing for us are not here anymore. So I'll still watch some of that, but I'll watch the spring practices really, really closely.
So, going to the then and now stuff, really not even that long ago, the way you structure a staff and like the unlimited size, and almost like an NFL front office now too. How did you scheme about building out what it's supposed to look like? How many positions you have? What they do? Just the whole deal seems pretty.
Yeah,
good.
I know there's been a little bit made of the staff of some returning players, and I get the excitement about it, but it's like I told Pat or Noel or those guys that played for me that are now on the coaching staff, as I didn't hire them because of what they did in the 2000s. I hired them what they can do to help us win right now, and it's important that I'm not just hiring a legacy guy because he's a legacy guy. I'm hiring this guy because what I think he can bring to our staff. He understands not just the culture, but also how we go about doing things in our program. But and staffing is different now. There's no limit on the number of coaches you can have, and you can have too many, I'm sure. But I think I got a nice mix of some experienced guys where I need to have some experience, and some young guys that are going to be really, really good coaches that are learning the craft and can be really good with our guys, and at the same time, you still got to recruit as well. So all that played a factor, and so the staff came together really well. Now I lost the coach, yesterday with Chad. Got the job at Texas, but I feel really good that a lot of the guys that I targeted and wanted to get on our staff I was able to get. So I'm very fortunate with that.
Have you ever had a time in your career where you had to replace every offensive lineman on
No, I can't remember. I know I've never had a time where you had 0 starters returning on defense, and then every lineman and probably 3 of the backups. So yeah, that is it. And again, I think you expect more turnover now because of the transfer portal part of it, but it was also the transfer portal and a bunch of seniors too. So it's a little bit unique.
You mentioned losing Chad Scott, so since you brought it up.
Yeah.
Is there any plan in terms of replacing that position, and how much of a hit is that, because he was going to be retained?
Yeah, he was rehired. I don't care, rehired him, and but there's a lot of. I mean, I got agents and coaches blowing me up all in the last 24 hours once word got out wanting to go. So I'll be able to hire a really good coach, and not too concerned with that. But it seems like a good opportunity for Chad, and I don't know him that well, but I think he's a really good coach, and he'll do well with Sark down there in Texas.
You're building a team. Obviously, your style of play is a factor in who you bring in, but also, too, the conference you're in, whether it was the Big Ten, does this kid fit what we do against Iowa or whatnot, or the Pac-12? Does that play a role in?
Not really. That's a good question. I don't really think conference affiliation is really like, you play a different type of guy in the Big Ten than you do in the Big 12 or what was in the Pac-12 or SEC or not. Nah. I mean, I think there's a difference between playing Power 5, Power 4, and Group of 5 from that respect. But hell, I mean, half the teams in the Big 12 were teams that were in the Pac-12 back when I was in the Pac-12. And to me, you get good players and good coaches and interesting schemes. I mean, had been in the SEC before, you saw obviously a little difference in the athleticism on the defensive line. I'm talking big guys that are athletic, 300-pounders that are athletic. But you're seeing some of those at Ohio State and Michigan and the Big Ten too. So, and you're seeing some of those in the Big 12. So I don't think there's a particular style of play that's unique. I think the biggest change now, and not just us, is that there's so much roster turnover and quarterbacks that are, seems like half the starting quarterbacks in Division I are transfer guys, and so there's just so much more movement, so many more moving parts. But I also think sometimes that's an opportunity. Maybe you can go from being at the bottom to being at the top quicker than before, right? Like, Arizona State showed that last year. And we weren't at the bottom last year. We were, where were we at in the Big 12? About in the middle somewhere? We're probably right in the middle. Now, we lost, like I said, 90% of the starters. So we better do a good job of replacing them with new guys or having young guys that sat behind them and getting them ready to play.
So long corners, things like that doesn't really play in. Kids with length or that type of stuff?
Well, I'm not. Yeah, I know sometimes these, all they get, if I'm at Ohio State or Alabama or I'm Dallas Cowboys or, New England Patriots, I'm going to have certain measurables and all that kind of stuff. But, I'm not going to worry about length of the corner. I want corners that can run. I mean, shoot, and run and cover somebody, I'm not doing a dunk contest, you know what I'm saying? So, shit, that length ain't really a big deal to me. But right now, I think we need to get a little faster. I mean, just overall, I think we got some fast guys. We need to get a little faster. Probably need to get a little tougher. Probably need to get a little stronger. Probably need to get a little more explosive. But we'll be all right, I think. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I haven't had a practice with him yet, so.
I'm interested in your adjustment to NIL in the sense that I'm guessing the funds available here are greater than at Jacksonville State and
Yeah.
NIL, obviously it's been around for a while, but Was there a temptation that once you got here, oh, hey, we got to spend this and get these guys, or we need to spread it out? I mean, how have you kind of handled the adjustment to this?
Sure, it's a little different. You better have a little bit of a plan other than just grab bagging. It's, and again, it's depending on what you have. But even at Jack State, we created a model of, like, we had an NFL roster, and like, if this is the money that we have, this percentage goes to QB1, this percentage goes to left tackle 2, this percentage goes to corner 1, and kind of like the NFL does a 53-man roster. Like, now we're not going to pay our starting quarterback 18% of your salary cap like you do in the NFL, simply because then you don't have enough money for your team. But we are going to have a kind of an earned success model. Whereas if you're the starting left tackle after August camp, you're going to get probably more money than the scout team right tackle. You know what I mean? And you got to have kind of a fair kind of system that you want to do with your players. And so we have that model in place. We have that system ready to go. And some of that's already been implemented. A lot of that will be implemented after, we hope, June 30th, and the rev share comes into play and the school can now pay players. That was a thought process that in July 1, the school takes ownership per se, and then that model kind of starts to take place. And then from what I understand, the NIL part will still be active, but it'll be better regulated through the NCAA, where they have an AI program or somewhere where you're getting legitimate deals, where you're not getting $100,000 to post one thing about an obscure business over here. It's actually value. And I think that's one thing where maybe at West Virginia we have an advantage because, we're the only Power 4 big school playing football in the state. Folks in Huntington, you hear me out. There's no pro team of NBA, or NFL, or Major League Baseball or something. So our guys are a bigger deal in our state than a lot of similar type of programs in other states. So I think hopefully we can still have some NIL stuff for guys that where there's interest at, and we can get some really good players with that.
You're getting an early start on spring ball this year compared to a lot of programs in WVU in the past few years.
Yeah, hell, where's this? How long is these winters always? I don't remember these winters lasting. Remember you talking about snow? I don't.
You were here in 2007, 2006. It was worse back then.
Was it worse back then?
I was over in Meigs County in Ohio back then, but I felt like it was worse in Appalachia in general. I mean, it's been getting warm recently.
Well, we're fortunate we got an indoor. So if it gets really cold, I want to go outside just because we have more room. But if it's snow on the ground, shoot, we're going to be indoors. So, but this is a little earlier start than normal, and it's simply because of the change in the calendar with the transfer portal and all that coming up in April.
Is there any more, benefits strategically to that, more time with the players, or to put in the system in the spring, or you get to it earlier, you develop that chemistry earlier maybe?
No, the only difference would be now the fact that the coaches can be around your guys in the summer somewhat, particularly in the month of June, spring ball still has an importance, but the fact that we can still visit with them and meet with them in the summer changes that dynamic.
You had to go through this whole process, obviously, at Jacksonville State. So any specific lessons you learned your first year there preparing that are going to lead to some changes the way you do it this time?
You talking about roster-wise?
Spring, no, just running spring, going into spring practice.
Yeah, I try to remember every, what is this, the seventh different one, or this times two. So the seventh different head coach job. I could probably assure you every first spring was like half miserable, just ugly, just like, golly, new terminology, and are they going to understand how we want to do this? And I think every first-year coach would probably tell you their first spring is always the worst because you're still learning your players, and and every spring after that becomes a little easier. Even with all the roster, like last year, Jack State, we had 60 new guys, and even with half the roster turning over, it was still easier because it was the third spring, and the returning players knew how to do things. Like right now, none of them know how we go about doing things. So it's a little bit, the first spring, I got to remind myself, remember, it's the first spring, it's the first spring, it's the first spring. And, I don't want that to be an excuse. So we still got to have urgency to be ready, but it is the first spring. So each spring after this should be easier, I guess.
Assistant coaches or staffers, analysts, anything yet that you're really impressed with or you feel like have made a big impact over the winter?
Yeah, there are, but that's like you asking what players are making. I don't want to mention one or two and then leave somebody out because I will. But the staff, like I said, it came together is really well. Really proud with that. And then, I'm really anxious for our play. I've seen a little bit of them through workouts, but I think we got some talented guys. So, and I do think it's important to them. That's part of the deal that, this is an easier environment to kind of stress that, hey, football it's not more important than your family, your religion, your education, or your health, but it's got to be next. And I do think it's important to our guys. We got a great facility. We got a great fan base. It's important to them. So, I think our guys are in a good frame mindset from that standpoint. But I always tell the guys, if something's really, really important to you, probably put a whole lot of your effort into it. And my demands, I don't think are so much different than theirs that would be a problem.
You mentioned this being year one.
Yeah.
And there's been conversation about the expectations. It took you a minute to build it up 20 years ago after a rough first season. But people bring up Curt Cignetti at Indiana, year one, immediately they're in the playoff. What's your thought process on trying to build it up in year one in this era? Because there is an argument that you can win quicker at a new place in this era, unlike what you
could win quicker, or or take you longer. Like you could get more and you can lose more. So you can lose your whole roster, or you can, gain a whole roster back. It is a different dynamic. So coaches, you got to adjust to that, and I guess that's where I jumped on the guys a little bit this morning, but because there's a sense of urgency that maybe I shouldn't have right now because it's only February, but at the same time, there's I don't care if we don't have any starters returning. That's not an excuse for us not to have a good football team and not to try to get better. And I told him, I said, I didn't get hired for nostalgia reasons. You know what I mean? I got hired to win. That's why I'm sitting here. Not because they wanted to talk about 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. I got hired because the expectation is to win. So we're going to try to win.
Rich, you do have 7 players who played for you at Jacksonville State. So,
is that how many years?
Yeah. So what kind of advantage is that? They know a little bit about what to expect.
Yeah, a couple of them left before I left. Yeah, they got back. Hey, boss. KK, all those nice things I said about you. No, those guys. A couple of them left the year before. But at least those guys have helped, I think, a little bit just from a standpoint that some of the methods, some of the drills, and certain scheme-wise, it's helped a little bit. I don't know, those guys kind of understand how we do things. They didn't have to adapt to that. But at the same time, they got to prove themselves all over again, too. I think that probably helped Coach Cignetti. I don't know how many he brought from James Madison, probably a dozen or so. And I think that probably helped, particularly with the transition. We didn't have that many. But one thing I've been pleased with, our guys they seem eager to learn. You know what I mean? I think it's not, obviously the quarterbacks are part of it, but they seem very eager to learn our stuff, and it's going to be a fun group to coach.
We got time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
Justin?
Coach, you're talking about some of the changes, obviously, from now to then, portal, and there's also I would imagine, a much different state of affairs of the program, opinions of the program now as when you came in the first time? Does that bring more of a sense of urgency as you come into the second time around?
Well, you as far as expecting to win.
Well, the first time you came in for Dawn and the program was seemed like it was a lot more established. Now it's kind of, you're trying to rebuild.
I think it's a little bit more a sign of the times too. It's like, nobody has any patience and they want it all right now. And I'm the worst as far as having patience than anybody. And I'm sitting there for a reason, right? I mean, there's got to, so we've got a lot of work to do, but whether the same staff was coming back this year or not, it's like you said, every year it's a different, it's going to be a different challenge, and it's going to be that way. The unstableness of college football was probably going to be that way until maybe a year or so, if Congress gets involved or whatever, and has some kind of better structure with that. But again, that's just, I ain't gonna make excuse. We need to win, and our guys need to prepare to win, and our coaches need to coach to win, and we're going to do everything we can, but it's going to take a lot now. I'm just, just because this old guy's sitting in this chair and ain't going to snap my fingers and we're going to win 12 games and be in the playoff. That doesn't happen that way. We got to have a lot of guys working really, really hard. Coaches, staff members, players, fans, supporters. We need to break the record. What's the record for season tickets? 38,000. Hell, we need to break that record for season tickets. Let's go to 40,000, and we are going to have the best atmosphere in the Big 12. Let's break a school record for season tickets. That'd be great.
Early in the career, Tommy Bowden took a big part, and then Terry's late in your career, and you've met a lot of guys that are on your staff right now. I guess at Louisiana Monroe too.
Yeah.
I knew you knew it before, but what was that couple of years like, and what does that mean for this season moving forward?
I didn't have I didn't have an untraditional way in my career. I didn't really have a mentor, so to speak, that was a head coach that hired me as an assistant and then a coordinator, and then I moved up. I was a young college head coach at 24 and a young fired coach at 25 when they dropped football, and kind of created this old thing at Glenville, and it's whole different. So I had a different path. But if there was one person that probably had a bigger impact than anybody was Tommy Bowden when he hired me at Tulane. I was at Glenville, and we were doing well, and as head coach AD there and whatever, and he said, "Hey, come down to Tulane and run the offense." And I'm like, "I only know this offense." He said, "Well, you run it. You run the deal." And so he let me run it, and for 2 years at Tulane and 2 at Clemson, and then that's really, I think, propelled me to getting the big school job. So Tommy was really the guy that gave me the first big opportunity. And so then fast forward, whatever it is, 20 years later, and it's with Terry at Louisiana Monroe, and my son Rhett goes there as a quarterback, and I'm going there, and then I got a chance to not just work with Terry, who's a dear friend, but also Coach Zach Alley was there, Coach Willie Green was there, Coach Ryan Garrett was there, and met some really, really good coaches, and wind up taking a bunch of them with me to Jack State.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.